Hi everyone, my name is Abby Fisher and I'm the Financial Health Education Coordinator at Eastern Illinois University. I work at the Health Education Resource Center, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about budgeting in college. So to start off, it's important to recognize why we need to create a budget for ourselves. Creating a budget is important so that we can do things like pay back loans, start saving, spending within our means, preparing for our future, and just overall living a more comfortable life. So to start off, there are basically 5 steps to budgeting. So the first thing that you want to do to create a budget for yourself is to note your net income. There's many different elements that can go into your net income, especially when you're a college student. For example, if you have a refund check that comes every semester, you need to note that for yourself. And obviously that can change semester to semester. So just recognizing those changes and just being aware of how it can fluctuate throughout your time in college. You also want to note things like your savings. Savings are important because you want to know how much you can dip into those savings. If you're not going to have any money in your savings, just being completely aware of what you have behind the scenes. And then, of course, you have your income that is coming in every month, every week, bi-weekly, whatever your case scenario is. So there's things like inconsistent income and then consistent income. So your inconsistent income would be something like a family member maybe sends you a check one month, or maybe you just borrowed $20 from a friend, things like that, where a consistent income would be something more like a paycheck that you get bi-weekly or monthly. So that would be more of a consistent thing that you can note every month. Consistent income is really important to note, especially because that's something that, as we said, is consistent and is coming, and you know when it's coming. So it's important to note that to start off. The next thing you want to do is you want to start to track your spending. It can be really useful to just kind of have a notebook that you might keep on hand and you write down all of the things that you spend your money on every day. It's just a good way to kind of keep track of things. Maybe you do this for a month and then you see where you're at the end of the month. This is important too because it can make you a lot more aware of how much you're spending. Oftentimes we spend money without even really realizing how much we're spending. So by tracking that spending, it can kind of just make us more accountable for what we're doing. There's also like the little things that you would spend your money on and write down are typically your variable expenses, but you also want to note your fixed expenses. Fixed expenses is something more like a consistent income where it's something that you have to spend your money on monthly. So maybe it is rent for you or car insurance, or maybe it's an electricity bill. And those things can fluctuate sometimes, but a lot of them are also consistent. So your fixed expenses are things that are more consistent and you know how much you're going to have to spend each month. Setting financial goals for yourself is the next step that we're going to talk about. Setting financial goals is super important because it helps keep you accountable. Setting a goal for yourself, writing it down, keeping it in the back of your mind, and then you can think about that goal when it comes to making a big purchase or even little purchases. So if you have a short-term goal for yourself and a long-term goal for yourself, it's a way to keep you accountable. An example of a short-term goal would be something that is maybe in the next few weeks, next couple months. For example, maybe saving for spring break in a couple months is a goal of yours. A long-term goal is something definitely more in the future. So maybe you want to buy a car in a couple years, or maybe you want to buy a house in 10 years. It's important to set those goals for yourself so that you have things to look forward to and you can keep yourself accountable for why you want to save money. The next thing you want to do is make a plan for yourself. So now you know what your fixed and variable expenses are and you have your monthly cost. You want to subtract your monthly cost from your net income and then you'll see how much money you have or don't have left over every month. So that can help you to move to the next step, which is adjusting your habits. If you have a large amount of money left over at the month, you can recognize, okay, I have this money and I need to put it towards something important, like maybe savings. If you have no money left over at the end of the month, that means that you're going well within or well beyond your means and you want to make some cutbacks. So some things you can do is just dipping into more of those variable expenses that you have. So if you're spending too much money on groceries, or maybe you're spending too much money on non-essential things like video games or going to the movies, those are things that you need to dip into to go well within your means. So next thing we're going to do is talk about some easy ways to budget. These are just some useful techniques that we have to kind of just keep people more up to date with how they can budget, and they're just simple. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the envelope system. So with that envelope system, you have basically different envelopes that you're going to label with different expenses that you have. So you want to add up all your monthly fixed and variable expenses, and then you want to subtract those expenses from your total monthly income. So basically the first two steps to budgeting. And then once you have all of that, you want to put each expense into its own envelope, and you want to label each envelope. So if you have $300 that you know you have to spend on your rent, you're going to put the $300 into that envelope and label it. So every time you receive your paycheck, you're going to cash it in, divvy it up, and put the labeled amount of money into each envelope. Any leftover money can be used for once. If there's not enough money, then cut into variable expenses. This is a great way to hold yourself accountable for all your expenses throughout the year. And yeah, you can kind of just make it what you need to. You can have an envelope for savings, for rent, for utility bills, all kinds of things. The 50-30-20 rule is the next technique we're going to talk about. I think that this one is super useful. With this budgeting technique, you're going to split your costs into three main categories. So the first category is 50%, so you shouldn't be spending any more than 50% of your take-home pay on all essential expenses in your life. I know for college students that this can be somewhat unrealistic, so we'll talk about how we can kind of adjust in a little bit. The next thing you want to do is 20%. You want to focus on that and put a minimum of 20% of your paycheck towards a strong financial standing. This can be things like putting your money towards an emergency fund, putting it towards savings, debt, etc. And then 30% of your take-home pay should be used on lifestyle choices. This is just things like entertainment, shopping, all kinds of stuff like that. Mainly just those variable expenses that we talked about. So obviously this isn't always 100% how students can use it, because 50% of your expenses usually go to essentials and then maybe then some. So basically, if you're kind of going above that 50% mark, then you want to dip into the 30%. And then if you have to, dip into the 20%, because it's super important to set aggressive savings goals for yourself. But if you have to, obviously you have to. So maybe you can adjust it to maybe 10% to your savings, and then maybe like 15% for your variable expenses. The next technique we're going to talk about is snowball budgeting. So with snowball budgeting, it's basically just about chipping away at your debts that you have accumulated. This can be something small. So let's say that you borrow $20 from a friend, and maybe you owe a family member $100. You start to chip away at those smaller ones. So you pay back the $20 to your friend after maybe your first paycheck. Then maybe after a few paychecks, you can pay back your family member the $100. And then maybe you have student loans you took out. Then you'll start to slowly chip away at those. But basically starting at the lowest debt that you have and working your way up. Reverse budgeting is a great technique for saving. As I mentioned, saving is something that many college students don't think about, but is super important, especially when we're looking towards the future. You want to have a strong financial standing, so this can really help students there. So to create that strong financial standing, maybe a goal of yours could be to put 20% of your income per month towards your savings. So basically you do that, and then after that it's kind of a gray area. You've met your savings goal for the month, and then you can do what you need to with the leftover money you have. And then of course there's digital budgeting. Budgeting is obviously super useful this day and age because it's just in the palm of your hand. You can get really great apps on your phone that can help you budget properly, and it's an easy way for you to keep track of all those expenses. Some apps that we find pretty useful here at the HERG are Mint, Pocket Guard, LearnVest, Personal Capital, and Dollarbird. Obviously, there's lots of other digital budgeting apps out there, but it's important to be cautious of what apps you're putting your financial information into, because obviously it's pretty important to keep that information private. But yeah, just being cautious, doing your research, and this can be a super useful way to budget your money properly. And then, of course, for any more financial help, you can contact the HERC. The HERC is located across from Pemberton Hall at the Booth House. You can contact us at herc.financialed@eiu.edu. We're available for financial consultations, presentation requests, or any financial questions that you may have. So please don't hesitate to reach out.